Hello, everyone. My name is John French. I'm responsible for recruitment, alumni, and community here at Next Canada. I'd like to welcome you to today's AMA Facebook Live, where we've got a couple of alumni of the Next Founders program that will be answering your questions and telling you about their experiences. I'm going to give you an overview of what Next Founders and what Next Canada is all about. If you're watching on Instagram, keep in mind that this is also available on Facebook. You can ask us questions through the chat platform in Facebook Live. You can also email info@nextcanada.com with any questions that you have. The deadline to apply to this program is March the 18th. And for those of you that are in the GTA, over the next week and a half, there are a number of events happening here in the city. Tomorrow, myself and a few other members of the team will be at WeWork in Toronto. Next week, on Monday, there's the TechTO International Women's Day event happening in the evening at RBC Water Park Place, where two of our alumni, Jane from Optimity and Nuha from EcoPackers, will be presenting. And then on Tuesday, here at Next Canada headquarters, we have an event with Marie Chevrier from Sampler, Julia from Newt Food, and also Iliev, who's from ReadySpec. So there's a bunch of opportunities for you to continue to learn more about what we're doing. I joined Next 9 years ago when the organization delivered one program that was called the Next 36, which was focused on new grads, students, idea stage companies. And our goal was to give them mentorship, access to capital, role models, workspace to help them build companies in Canada where they didn't need to go to Silicon Valley or New York or Boston. We expanded to the Next Founders program, which we'll be focusing on today, which was to focus on pre-seed to seed stage companies, founders who were looking to scale, quite often founders who didn't have a formal business background and were looking to fill in gaps in their education, and also graduates or alumni of other world-class, top-tier accelerators and incubators. And then 3 years ago, we launched Next AI, which was an accelerator based in Toronto and in Montreal for, I would say, idea stage to pre-seed AI-enabled or AI-focused companies. And we take about 20 companies in each of those two cities every year. The reason we'll dive deeper into Next AI is because if you are a founder of a company that is using machine learning, predictive analytics, reinforcement learning, computer vision, and you get accepted into the Next Founders program, you can also tap into all of the tools and resources that we provide to those Next AI companies. Finally, if any of you were tuning in to hear from Michael Hellender, he was the third guest that was supposed to be here today. We're taking all precautions with flu and virus and colds going around. He's a little bit under the weather. But for those of you that are working on deep science-based companies, Michael's a PhD who co-founded a great company called OTI Lumionics that uses organic LED lights. And for those of you that are looking to commercialize research that you've done, he's a great resource. And so I would say email info@nextcanada.com if you want to talk to that kind of founder and how this program has helped them. I'm going to pause and introduce two of our alumni who've given up their time today to share with you their experience. And so I'd like to start by introducing Natasha Varma, who's the CEO and co-founder of Vondry.
Hi, I'm Natasha. I'm happy to be here today and answer any of your questions. I was part of the Next Founders cohort last year, and I have a business background. I have a finance undergrad. I did an MBA. I was in finance and enterprise sales before I kind of ventured into the entrepreneurial pursuit, and I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. And Tyler from Inkbox.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Inkbox, if you don't know it, it's tattoos for now, not forever, essentially. They're basically temporary tattoos that actually look real and last long. It's pretty dope, designed by the world's best tattoo artists. So I did Next Founders 3 years ago, I think. I think it was 3 years ago. I just had a communications degree at the time, and I was struggling to find what I wanted to do in life, and I had this idea, and Next Founders was a part of the community that helped me understand how to build a business, alongside other things like the DMZ here in Toronto, and just generally speaking the startup ecosystem. So always happy to sit down and chat more about it and give back where I can. So yeah.
Maybe I'll ask you to talk a little bit more about what has happened to the company since you completed the Next Founders program and where you're at right now.
Yeah, since we completed the Next Founders program, Inkbox, we've post Series A now, so we raised in Canadian dollars a like a $13 million Series A with some debt on that as well, and team up around 85 people right now, 90 people. Released a brand new product to the world, which took a lot of time and resources. Built a world-class team, I think was essential. Brought on some advisors that run companies that do over $1 billion a year in revenue. Just have generally surrounded ourselves with really good people.
Perfect. And we're going to dive back into fundraising because I know that there's always some questions about raising funding. But maybe we'll have Natasha talk a little bit more about Vondry and where you were when you got into Next Founders and where the company is right now.
Sure. So we were about a year into our business when I myself as a co-founder applied and got into the Next Founders program. It was an interesting kind of turning point for us because we were growing very fast, but we couldn't really sustain the growth. We kind of were bootstrapped, had some early, angel investment and family and friends money, but we realized quickly that to sustain that growth, we had to kind of rethink how we were going to approach things so that we could actually deliver on our promise to our customers. And so Vondry effectively, it's a web technology platform that brings people, individuals and businesses with laundry service providers. And so when we were in the Next Founders program, I still remember in the interview talking about how we're a pickup and delivery service for your laundry and dry cleaning. And that's how we started. And so we had our own vehicles and drivers on the road, and we partnered with cleaning companies to do the cleaning. And so we were giving consumers an experience similar to what you would expect from Foodora when you're hungry or, any kind of other consumer on-demand kind of service. But we realized that for us to grow and for this to be more effective, we actually pivoted in the midst of the program. And so I think having access to the network here and, fielding some of the problems we were facing with other people who've been in similar businesses, that was really insightful. And so today we actually are a purely technology company that's building the technology to kind of run laundry service providers' backbone kind of behind the scenes, and we're no longer the company that we started out as.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And you've both kind of talked about the network. And Next Canada, we're a nonprofit, registered charity. The organization was launched 9 years ago, and some of the founding patrons that supported this vision and got the organization off the ground were three of Canada's most impressive entrepreneurial families. So Jimmy Pattison out in Western Canada, Galen Weston here in Ontario, and the Desmarais family and Paul Desmarais Sr. out in Montreal. And they got behind this idea that was modeled loosely after the Own the Podium program from the Vancouver Olympics, kind of a non-Canadian idea of investing a ridiculous amount of resources in a small number of high potential entrepreneurs. The goal being to, own the podium on the global stage with regards to entrepreneurship. And they were the early pioneers, but since then we've added 400 or 500 people to the entrepreneurial network, faculty members, investors, entrepreneurs, corporate execs who are first partners. And we'll talk a little bit about the faculty and the education piece, but maybe when it comes to the network, is there one person that you can think of that you met during the program or that you were connected to because of the program that has had a profound impact on your business?
Well, you mentioned Marie earlier. I didn't meet her in the program, but she was kind of one of the faces of Next, and you've seen her. I'm sure if you kind of browse Next's website, Marie Chevrier is kind of all over the place, and she's been really instrumental, like especially in the early days, even before Next, and through the program, and kind of connecting you to people that could really help you, or just offering you that mentorship and being there for me. And I think as a fellow woman founder, she was really instrumental in kind of keeping you going and keeping that momentum. And I think that relationship has been really beneficial, and is also part of why I applied to Next.
Okay.
Can't think of any one individual specifically that had like a high amount of impact on me. It was more broad community, and a lot of people I actually met not even through Next, where they were at Next, but they were in a different cohort. But so I met them through the extended community of Next at like events and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think one of the ones early on that really helped me understand what I wanted to do with Inkbox was Mike Murchison, who's at ADA now. I think he was in one of the next programs, I believe, early on, Next 36. And I think I met him through some community things, and then he was at the DMZ as well. So, but he helped me really frame out like what Inkbox should be from the get-go. It's shifted a lot, of course, since then, but he helped me like drive into it. So,
perfect. Yeah. Great answer. And that's one of the prime benefits, I think, of this program. We'll talk a lot about access to potential funding and having workspace for your company in our space, and the impressive people who are senior who come in and work with you. But you're tapping into an alumni network that is 600 strong, and they're all connected. Visha, my colleague who's behind the monitor in our studio right now, is an alumni of Next 36 and is our alumni success officer. So we take this very seriously because we know our alumni are our greatest advocates and champions, and part of her role is to make sure that they're all connected to each other technologically and also with physical events, professional development, thought leadership. And one of the other benefits of being in a program where you're a next founder, so you're one of 20 entrepreneurs in that program with slightly later stage founders, but you're also interacting with Next 36ers who are at school or right out of university, and AI companies that are doing really neat things in the artificial intelligence space, is that there's this incredible sharing across industries, across stage of company. And the other, I would say, unintended byproduct is that this is entrepreneurship, and not all companies are going to succeed, but you have a network of, wicked smart, rock star, committed, entrepreneurial minded individuals that are now part of your peer network. It's almost like a YPO or a young CEOs network, and we see so many entrepreneurs that go through one program joining another company because of the network that is made. And so I was happy to hear that response. The value proposition for those of you that are thinking about applying, obviously we've talked about the network and the alumni community, but one of the things that differentiates Next and Next Founders from, I would say, almost any other program that's out there is that we do focus on the individual, and we provide what we call founder development and this robust educational program. And when it comes to the individual, when you apply, even if there are multiple founders on the same team, you apply as one person, and you talk about what you're hoping to get out of the program, what you can bring to the program, kind of your horsepower to build the business. And so obviously, if one of you get into the program, your venture is part of Next Founders, but we really want to elevate or raise the experience, the background, and the likelihood of success of individual founders. And one of the ways we do it is with a tailored curriculum. Ajay Agarwal, who's one of the 4 co-founders of Next Canada, has created a curriculum where he brings in top faculty members from Harvard Business School, MIT, Rotman, UBC, Georgetown, all across the country. And you're often learning in a way that is directly relevant to your company. And so I'm going to ask the alumni if they can kind of talk a little bit more about what some of the classroom experience might be like, how it differed from what they thought it could be like coming into it, and if there are any specific examples of people that you heard from over the course of the summer, who they might be.
Yeah, I think what stood out to me with the classrooms in Next Founders specifically was the kind of how they structured the learning like in a Socratic way, like Harvard Business School does. So give you a case study, you'd read through it, and then the instructors would like just ask you what you thought of certain things, certain tactics, certain strategies, what should they do in their situation. And you had to give answers, and they didn't pull any punches, which was really nice. Like they're pretty, I wouldn't say mean, but like they would lay into you. Like it was brutally honest, and that's what you need because the world is like that. Business, it's brutally honest. Money talks. So it was really good to get exposure to that style of learning. I had not experienced that before, so that was my experience.
Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned, I do have a business background, so I still found some of the classes really helpful. Someone who comes to mind, Professor Nanda from Harvard, his kind of funding classes that are kind of financial valuation classes that are specifically geared to startups. And I think as an entrepreneur, that was really helpful because a lot of times when you go to B school or you have, a finance background, it's a lot of what you learn is applicable to corporations. And every entrepreneur knows that you can't start a business trying to value like your Amazon. It just doesn't work like that. And so I think, like Tyler said, the case studies and just being able to have kind of a more real insight into how to really value your business when it's really nothing more than an idea and a few tests out there in the market, I think that's definitely really valuable.
Okay. There's a listing of some of the faculty that are active in the program over the summer, and there are people like Christian Catalini from MIT, who's one of the world leaders when it comes to equity crowdfunding, blockchain, cryptocurrency. He was one of the founders involved with the Colibra Facebook currency project, and he comes in and works hands-on with the teams. One of my favorite stories, I've got multiple, but from Raman Ananda, who comes in from the Harvard Business School. He teaches venture finance to the MBAs at Harvard, and will come in for 3 days and work on negotiating with VCs and valuing your company and how to read a term sheet. And he actually workshopped Michael Hellender's term sheet, kind of Chatham House rules, behind closed doors, nothing gets out, with the cohort. And it was one of the most robust and incredible learning experiences for those founders that were in the room to see that happening in real time. I know another one of our alumni, Stephen Lake, who's one of the 3 co-founders of North, formerly Thalmic Labs, and they have raised a significant amount of funding, 150 million plus, from some of the top investors in Silicon Valley. He was interviewed by Maclean's and asked, how did you get the deal that you got? The VCs that he was talking to were saying, what's the secret sauce? We talked to entrepreneurs who have been multiple repeat entrepreneurs. They're 50 years old and they don't know the stuff that you know. And it's because of Raman Ananda, who comes into the next program. And so there is this education and there's case studies. And for entrepreneurs, sometimes that doesn't sound like a really good fit, doing a Harvard Business School case study. But as you've heard, it is directly applicable to the company that you're building. Talking a little bit more about fundraising, and I think there was one question that might have already come in on the fundraising side. Next Founders doesn't provide any direct funding, nor do we take any equity in the businesses. And that's one of the differences between Next 36 and Next AI, where we do provide some funding and we'll take an ownership stake on a safe investment vehicle. But for Next Founders, there's no direct investment and no equity given up. However, I would say many of the teams over the years have come into the program having already raised anywhere between $100,000 and $4 million, and we're looking to raise either a large seed round or we're driving towards an A round. And so between the education that you get through people like Raman Ananda and then the network of angels and VCs that come into the room and into our space during the summer, most companies that are reaching milestones that are looking to raise have been successful. And now for Tyler, because you have raised funding, to the extent that you're comfortable, how would you advise an entrepreneur that is maybe 1 or 2 steps before where you were? What are some of the things that they should think about if they're looking to raise, and what was your experience like?
I think one of the first things to note is there's different verticals in which you raise, right? Like it depends on your industry. The revenue multiples are always different. Kind of what's a market standard valuation's different. What kind of revenue run rates you need to see, what kind of customer retention you need to see, really depends on what industry you're in. So I'm in consumer, so my answer will be specifically about the consumer industry. So that's an important thing to understand. Another thing for just raising capital, it's a lot of it is a numbers game and a relationships game at the same time. VCs have a slew of reasons to say no. There's so many different reasons to say no. They have to have a lot of conviction in what you're doing, especially as you get further along in the fundraising process, like beyond seed, when you're in like Series A, Series B, what have you. You're not just selling a partner, you're selling a partnership. So you don't have to convince one person. You have to convince one person who has to convince like 6 people or 8 people in the general partnership. So you have to think through like, how am I giving this person enough ammunition to sell it to the rest of the partnership? That's something I don't think I hear anyone talk about ever really. And in my experience, it's best to give that, you're kind of like making them look good. Like you kind of have to make the partner who believes in you look good. You need to find, first of all, that champion at a partnership, and then go from there. Another thing important to understand is the difference between a principal, an associate, a partner, a general partner. there's different levels and different influence within in a partnership that these investors have. So a principal or associate are on the lower rung. They're typically junior. They don't call the shots. They just source deals. So, you sell them to get you an intro to someone, but you really want that intro to the general partner. Because if you get a GP backing you or partner backing you, that's the person who calls shots and makes decisions and has a lot of weight in the partnership. So that's the person who you want to convince. Beyond that, it's really important to have someone who can help you think through it. So someone who's been there before, be it on the venture side or obviously your side of things. In fact, it's probably good to have both, so you can see both angles. Having someone who kind of knows the industry specifically and like raising money in that industry is really helpful because they help you understand like what's market, like what are investors expecting to see from a company at your stage to put money into it. I always give this example, like people that go into Dragon's Den who don't know what they're doing and they just get ripped apart because they set some crazy valuation, but it's because they don't know what's market. They're not an investor. They don't know what to expect. So you have to go in with all of the answers essentially, because the worst thing to do is be asked a question and not be able to answer it. And if you're not able to answer it, be honest about it. But if it's a really easy question that you should know, like what is your cost to acquire a customer and what's their lifetime value? If you can't answer those types of questions, then it's like that they will not trust you at all. So that's a couple points. Yeah.
And you're backed by investors in both Canada and the US, is that correct?
Yeah.
And do you see any differences between mindset, mentality, process?
There's quite a big difference. Straight up, there's just not as much capital in Canada. There's not, because we have a large middle class. We don't have a great disparity in wealth in Canada. There's just not a lot of centralization of capital, and we're 10 times less the size of the States. So in the States, you have like just so many pools of capital, be it venture funds, family offices, just privately wealthy individuals, all over the place. So there's tons of it around. It's a matter of how do you find the right people. In terms of actually going and raising, American investors are a little bit more moonshotty. They'll believe in bigger ideas, like you mentioned the Amazon thing. Like they're more likely to believe in something like that, whereas Canadian investors are definitely more conservative. Not all of them, but majority of them are a lot more conservative. And then in the States, because you have so many different types of, you have so much capital, there's not just like broad funds that invest in a lot of different things. You get a lot of funds that invest in particular verticals. So for us, we have funds that invest just in consumer startups. You don't find that in Canada. You have funds that are pretty broad typically. And so I found that the American funds are a lot more helpful in like industry specific things, whereas the Canadian funds are a lot more helpful at the beginning stages and helping you understand how to like, just like run a business, generally speaking. So,
Great answer. Thank you. Natasha, as you think about other geographies that you want to expand to or test and see if there's uptake, what are some of the things that are important when assessing a market or figuring out where you might want to kind of expand or do business geographically?
Sure. I think for a service such as ours, density always plays into it. And so even though we don't do the operations of the delivery anymore, I think it is a volume game. And so for us, there's definitely a need for this service in other Canadian cities. So we're thinking along the lines of like Vancouver or Montreal. Of course, there is that fact that when you're building technology, language comes into play. And so then we'd have to translate everything we have as well. But those are some of the places, and I think part of the reason sometimes we get told by investors like, why don't you just scale in the GTA or go like, I don't know, Hamilton or somewhere like that? And I think for us, it's pretty simple. I think it would be easier to try it and test it for sure. But I think what's also important is that if it works really well and it's really tight and replicable and can scale, it should be able to work just as well in Vancouver versus in Hamilton. And so I think for us, that's kind of the reasoning behind trying to test markets that may be different. Also, you get different demographics, different people, different kind of behavior. And I think when you're trying to do something in technology that you hope will scale, you kind of have to think bigger picture beyond your city or your boundaries, because then it's not really a startup anymore and it kind of becomes more of a small business.
Great. Getting a couple questions coming in that relate to the time commitment and the timeline and co-working space during the program. And so after our March 18th deadline, in early April, there will be an interview process with a selection committee that consists of alumni, entrepreneurs, investors, and we historically, I would say it's about a 10-to-1 ratio. So we will get about 200 completed applications for approximately 20 individual spots in the program. We'll invite the top 40 or so to interview in early April, and by the middle of May, we've made offers to the 20 that will get accepted into the program. There's a commitment, and one of the best things about this program for a founder that is kind of heads down building a business, has a team, is that you're not required to geographically be in the city of Toronto for the duration of the summer when the program runs, and it's also much more relaxed. I would define it as a la carte versus the Next 36 and the Next AI programs, where there is a serious commitment to be in classes, workshops, sessions, 100 hours over the course of the summer. With Next Founders, there's a 2-day immersion block in early May that is a requirement, and then over the remainder of the summer, there are 12 hours that you need to kind of pick and choose what make the most sense. And then you get this syllabus. You get a course outline, a calendar, and you know when the venture finance prof is coming in. You know when there are VC office hours. You know when there are huge events and opportunities to connect with our partners. And all we ask is that you RSVP and show up and participate in that programming that you register for over the summer. Obviously, we've seen that the entrepreneurs that participate the most get the most out of it and engage in our workspace and with our mentors and advisors and all of the people that we'll put in front of you. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. But the time commitment can be fairly minimal, and that's because a number of the people that are participating in the program do come from a business background or have built multiple businesses or are just very busy building their company and don't need every single workshop, class, or event that we put on. On the workspace front, Next Canada has about 8,000 square feet of space in the heart of downtown Toronto. We have co-working space or hot desks for our teams, although they are fairly limited and on a first-come, first-served basis. For teams that are larger, I would say larger than 2 co-founders, we do work with a number of great community partners to identify larger co-working space where you can have dedicated full-time permanent space. But one of the great things about Next Canada and the hub is that there's always an event, a talk going on, or that there's interaction amongst those 3 different cohorts. So I hope that answers that question. For Tyler, we hear a lot about the battle for talent and growing a team, and I guess 2-part question. Number 1 is, how has culture changed at Inkbox from, let's say, employee 10 to employee 90? And the second part of the question is, what are your pain points on hiring currently?
Culture change. From 10 to 90, I think it's a lot more like loose when you're younger. Like there's not a lot of structure. It's kind of all over the place. People are just doing stuff, and people jump between roles. As you grow, you have to obviously hire more senior, experienced people. With that comes so many different things going on in an organization, you need more structure as well. So not just org structure stuff, but like, how do meeting structures work? How do your objectives work? How do you track objectives? How do you track roadmap? It's always in flux too, right? So it's always something you're thinking about, is like, how do I get this team to perform optimally? In terms of like hiring talent, it changes as well. I think as you scale up too, you try to find, when you're early on, you try to find people who are very broad, I find, like who can kind of do a lot of different things. And then I guess it depends on the company, but that was for us. And as you scale up, it gets more specific. So like you get a little bit more siloed in a sense. And then you kind of have to figure out, how do you go back from those silos to get people to coordinate more again. So we kind of went through a period where we really siloed everyone, because we needed specific expertise, but then they weren't talking together enough. So we needed to like de-silo them. So, and now we're like, we need to add a little bit more siloization back. I just made up a word. It's a new one, guys. And then in terms of like pain points and hiring is the pain point. Hiring's hard. It really is. It's not easy. I think, especially with my business, I think it's in a consumer startup. There's not a lot of us in Canada, so there's not a lot of places to pull talent from. I don't have a lot of companies I can poach from, for example. So it's a lot of like finding people who worked in ancillary roles who I think have the same traits that could succeed in a role that we need. But yeah, hiring is always, people like, I think hiring is one of the hardest things you do, because you don't know. You really don't. It's really hard to know if they're going to perform well in your organization. There's so many variables and factors involved. But the key thing is to fire pretty fast. People say hire fast, fire fast. I mean, sure, it's a bit rude to fire extremely fast, but like, you got a 3-month probation period usually with an employee under employment standard law to just test it out and see if this person's right. And you can get rid of them in 3 months without much hassle. So, but after that, it's, yeah.
And do you, what was the question that I was going to ask? It was on the tip of my tongue. Like as you have grown, are there specific tools or resources or people that you have been able to either call upon or that you found particularly helpful?
Yeah. So your board, your investors, your network should really help with that. That's really important. When you get bigger, you have your HR department help you with hiring. They help you source candidates. They screen the candidates for you. So you don't have to do a lot of the kind of grunt work. They'll basically be qualified when they get to you. In terms of like tools though, I would say, one of the challenges is understanding like, what should I pay this person? That's pretty easy to find out. Typically you can either look at Glassdoor, just for like market salaries. You can look at AngelList, like just other job postings that are similar, and then look at like ranges in salary. So those are some tools you can use. You can look at Indeed and LinkedIn as well. That helps for that. I mean, it depends on what you're using. We use Bamboo for our HR and stuff, and that has a recruitment platform within it. So that's what we use to track like our hiring process. But you can use like an Asana board or Google Docs. I mean, you can use anything really, but you just got to be able to track like everything. Another key thing is projects. I always give someone a project is essential to see how they actually work through something, because sometimes you'll get people who will show you a good portfolio. Designers, for example, we've had a lot of like product designers, UI, UX designers give us portfolios. We're like, that is a nice portfolio, but it's like the same portfolio as a bunch of other people sent us because they went through BrainStation or something, and they all had the same template. So when we actually got them to do a project, it really showed what their true colors were.
That's great.
And they were colorblind. No.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And now for Natasha, you mentioned Marie from Sampler, and another female entrepreneur, Shanae Zinur, actually went through Next Founders and then joined Marie's team, which is another one of the stories that I love. But what advice would you give to other female founders out there that are looking at getting into or are in entrepreneurship or in tech and looking to grow and build their careers and build successful companies?
For sure. I think as women, we have to like kind of stand by each other and support each other. I think men do a great job with their camaraderie. Sometimes as women, we're kind of heads down focused, and then, sometimes we kind of don't know where we're going. And so I think being there to support each other, and like kind of, there's a lot of initiatives now that are geared at women. I know like International Women's Day is around the corner. And so I think just being engaged in the community and just trying to meet as many people as you can, honestly. Like, I actually co-founded a business with my husband, so it's been interesting because obviously we're opposite sex, and so we've seen like the dynamics are different when we do things and when we interact with people. And I think having the support system for me has been really, really important. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any specific funding or mentorship opportunities or programs that you have either tapped into or are familiar with and that you would recommend?
Yeah, I know BDC has like a women's kind of focused fund, and I mean that's only growing. And then there's a couple others like DMZ, I don't know if it's specifically funding, but there's been some woman kind of oriented workshops and breakfasts and lunches where you get to meet investors or entrepreneurs that have come in sometimes from the Valley or are local, and I think that's really helpful. I think there's honestly like they keep putting out more different ones that are geared specifically to women, and so I think take advantage of all of that. take advantage of Next, like apply, you're already going to stand out because there's not that many of us. So I think Next does a great job because I don't really have to highlight that I'm a woman in business. It's the same thing.
Perfect. Yeah. And we have done, there's still work to do, but 40% of Next companies have at least one female founder when you look across the board over the last couple of years. And I'd be remiss with International Women's Day coming up on Sunday not to highlight our great team, which is majority female. And if you do follow us on Instagram, I know that Steph and Jen and the team are doing a great piece kind of highlighting the Next Canada team and what the staff is doing and how they're supporting Canadian entrepreneurs. So check that out as well. Tyler, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on the topic or what if that fits into hiring or your team at Inkbox.
Yeah, I think as men, we have to be allies in this respect too, in terms of hiring. So pretty early on, we set out to make sure that we had gender parity in the office, not just across the company, but on our leadership teams as well, be it exec or management. So we do have that. It's not just that too, it's visible minority parity as well. So we strive for parity on that, and we're always around parity. So, it fluctuates 46, 54, 58, 42. Oh, I can't do math. But always keeping that in the back of your mind when you're hiring, because there's talent everywhere, and you have to give people opportunities, right? So, yeah. How do you? My first question: do you have a sense for your customer breakdown by gender? Yeah, it's 60% female.
Okay, and how do you make decisions for female customers? Who on your team is involved in weighing in on that decision-making process?
I guess both genders, really. Yeah, I mean, frankly, I guess when you build a culture that has both, and not just like genders based on sex too, but like at the office we have people who go by all types of gender pronouns, right? So we make sure that we include people in all types of decisions. A good example of that actually is for Black History Month last year, we have one of our Black employees, Danielle, came forward, was like, hey, we're just underrepresented on a lot of like social media accounts, and ours too. We just didn't have a lot of customers posting photos that were of color, and so we just didn't have the UGC to use. And she's like, let's for the month of February, let's just only do Black content. And so we worked with a bunch of influencers to get like 30 days of Black content, and then every day we posted it. We did the same thing this year, although we only did about 90%. We wanted to, make sure it wasn't only that. But that's an example of like an idea that just came from someone on the team, and just by having just inclusivity across the organization, you're just going to get inclusive decisions,
Mm-hmm.
So.
It's a great answer. Great answer. And again, if this topic, specifically with regards to females in tech, in STEM, and entrepreneurship, is something that is of interest to you, again, I'd highlight the good work that our friends at TechTO are doing. And Monday night, the focus of the monthly get-together is on celebrating and profiling successful female entrepreneurs. So definitely check that out. I want to ask each of you a more general question around, as a founder, like what keeps you up at night? I'll just leave it at that. Like, what are some of the biggest challenges and obstacles that you're facing right now?
I think it's important to make sure things don't keep you up at night. I sleep pretty soundly, even in stressful situations now. That wasn't the case when we started the business, but I feel like when you have a startup that like a lot of people rely on you, you need to be able to buffer yourself against that type of stress to some extent. A lot of people handle all different types of ways. And so, yeah, I sleep pretty well at night, but to your question, like, what do I stress about? Like, what do I think a lot about? What's always in the back of my mind? I think as a startup, there's always a balance between your revenue, your run rate, and revenue and run rate. It's the key thing. It's like how much revenue, like when you're venture backed, that is like, how much, like what is your top line revenue? And what is your run rate left over to get to the next step? Because once you're on that venture track, you're on that venture track, and you got to keep growing. Growth at all costs, but you got to make sure you have the runway to grow. If you don't have the runway to grow, well, then where are you? You're stagnant. So that's always in the back of my mind is cash flow and top line revenue. So, yeah.
Natasha?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think for any entrepreneur, it's pretty similar, but I think like Tyler mentioned, being able to compartmentalize your problems is really important. I think women sometimes aren't as good at doing that, but I think overall it's just really about for me, what I guess keeps me up or keeps me worried, like when we pivot, I mean, startup is like pivoting is really just a fancy way of saying you started again, kind of through the lessons you learned the first time around and switched it up and made it work. And so, it works and we're seeing results, but I think sometimes it can just be unnerving to think like, what next? Or, will my business survive this? Or, I think it's just that constant worry about what's next, because as entrepreneurs, you are really ambitious. You have big goals for yourselves, sometimes too high of goals. And I think it's just balancing that out and just trying to live in the day.
Mm-hmm. One of the pieces that we haven't done a deep dive on for anybody who's watching who is using artificial intelligence in the solution, if it's at the core to their business, is that back in 2016, Next launched, which was at the time one of the, if not the only, AI-focused venture accelerators in the world, I would say, leveraging that Next 36 model, which brings in faculty and scientists and entrepreneurs to work hands-on with our teams. And the only piece to highlight for those of you that are interested in Next Founders, but there's an AI angle, is that we do our absolute best, and it's usually fairly easy to plug you into some of the faculty and scientists that come in and work with our teams. And just to give you a few examples, Ajay's counterpart, so Ajay is our academic director on the business side. His counterpart is a guy named Graham Taylor, who's at the University of Guelph. He's a CFAR fellow. He does his PhD under Jeffrey Hinton, who's one of the godfathers of deep learning. He worked for Google Brain, and he's created a curriculum where you will hear from and learn from top computer vision faculty members from the University of Toronto or Carnegie Mellon. We bring, over the years, Raquel Erdison, who heads up Uber's autonomous vehicle group, has been involved with the program. We have had Sonia Fidler, who heads up NVIDIA's AI Research Lab. Our partners in Montreal work with people like Joshua Bengio, Joël Pinot, Doina Prekop. And so there's this rich academic, environment if you're working on computer vision or natural language processing. And then we bring in these entrepreneurs or corporates who are focused on applying and adopting artificial intelligence. So people like Borealis, which is RBC's AI research lab, led by Fatini Agrafiotti, who is also a Next Founders alumni and one of the co-founders of NIMI, works hands-on with our companies. And RBC and Scotiabank and Magna are huge supporters of this Next AI program. Reps come in from NVIDIA, come in from Apple, come in from Uber. And so if you are interested in AI and you're a little bit further along than our kind of typical Next AI teams, I encourage you to apply to Next Founders, because we will be able to expose you to that network as well. I know Tyler has done at least one accelerator and has been involved with the DMZ. Natasha, were you involved in any previous accelerator or incubator programs? No. Okay, so Tyler gets this one. How does Next and Next Founders complement or fit in with your experience with DMZ?
Well, DMZ didn't have courses. It's an incubator, right? It was more just you got space and network and community. And there was like programming and whatnot as well, but it was not nearly what Next Founders was, or I was say it's not focused, right? Like it's and you don't get that kind of Socratic style of learning where it's like it's real, So that's different in terms of like the time commitments too between them. I mean, the DMZ was a place that we worked out of, so you're there all the time. But the time commitment to actually be involved in the community there was nil. For Next Founders, I found it quite flexible. So Next Founders being the one where you already have a business and you already have revenue, you already have a team, you already have some funding, most likely. You're running a business, so it was good to have flexibility in it. So there's like required courses you need to attend, of course, and then there's optional ones. So because I was already doing things, like I didn't need to go to a couple of courses because I was like, I've already done this and I kind of learned this already. But even in some of the introductory courses, because I didn't go to business school, there are things that like on like price sensitivity and price flexibility, elasticity, things like that. Like I just remember being like, oh, I've never read about this before, and I priced a product without knowing this. Wow, I could have used this. So it would have been beneficial to probably have gone to more classes for me. But you do get flexibility in the Next Founders. Next 36, I think it's quite a bit of a time commitment, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I
Yeah.
can't speak to that because I didn't do that. So.
Yeah, perfect. And for those of you that are participating in other accelerators or incubators in Ontario or across the country, you can apply and get into and participate in Next Founders and also do whatever you're participating in concurrently. It's designed so that if you're outside of Ontario, you can come in and out 4 or 5 times over the course of the summer and leverage what you're getting from your local ecosystem as well as the Next Canada community. So I would definitely highlight that. The other piece to mention is that this is a program that is designed for Canadian citizens or those who are pursuing permanent residency or citizenship and have a company that's incorporated in Canada. Some people are familiar with the Startup Visa program, and Next Canada is approved for that program only for our Next AI Accelerator. And so Next Founders is not designed for international applicants. CoFounders, founding, and I know you mentioned your husband, and one of your co-founders is your brother, correct?
Mm-hmm.
For both of you, what's it like working and starting a company with a family member?
Yeah, I was pretty easy, to be honest. I think we don't live together, so it probably makes that easier not to live together because you see each other all day. But pretty easy. I mean, you know each other well. Co-founder problems are actually a really big issue. I have a coach, and she coaches like some other like way more successful than me than CEOs and stuff. And she always just mentions that like one of the most common things she talks about with CEOs and founders is co-founders and the disputes between them. I think when you start a company with people you know well, you know them well. So you have the benefit of knowing how they'll react to things. I think that's the benefit. The risk is you have something that is outside of it that you risk ruining as well. But I think that means you take greater care to be honest with each other, right? And as long as you're both honest, I think it works well.
I think it works great just because having a co-founder is someone that you have to really trust, and you already have that in place when you do it with someone you know. And yes, there is risk to your relationship, but honestly, like I've seen it work great. There was a piece recently about co-founders of Clearbank who are together, and like there's a few power couples who are kind of killing it. So I think it's really what you make of it. You set boundaries, you try not to talk about business at every meal or, every weekend, and and as the company grows, eventually you'll kind of be in places or roles where you're hopefully not constantly in each other's faces. And so I think you can make it work. And I think it does work really great because I think finding a great co-founder is actually really difficult. And a lot of people end up divorcing their co-founder who they never knew and then kind of have to go find it again. And it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I want to go a little bit off script and talk about something that Tyler was mentioning as he was coming in today, and that's kind of the world that we live in 2020, COVID-19, coronavirus, and this kind of news story has an impact not only on your business potentially and bottom line, but also how you manage your people as a CEO. And maybe talk a little bit about steps that you're taking in the office for your team, and also what this could potentially mean to your business, just some of the factors that you're thinking about.
Yeah, so it's obviously of great concern to a lot of companies, especially ones with supply chains, physical products, because a lot of those products come from China, or parts of them do at least, right? And a couple of weeks ago, a lot of factories were just shut down in China. Fortunately for us, we only get one piece from China. We've actually been pulling back from China. We'll pay a little bit extra to get it from here right now because the trade relations and stuff. It's always, when you get to a certain stage, the global stock market fluctuations and stuff actually affect your business, and you're like, oh shit, I have to pay attention to this kind of stuff. Crazy. So it's kind of cool actually. But for us, the COVID-19 stuff, we got in. It's when you have a board and you have like investors and stuff, they all share things with you that other companies are doing, and so you're getting like, first glance at like what Twitter's thinking of doing and these big companies. And so we've kind of learned from what they're doing, and like the next day we'll do what they did or something that they did. So for us, COVID-19, something like a potential pandemic virus that will spread here, your number one, we get two main concerns. One is keeping your staff healthy, and two, making sure that you can exist as a business still, right? So that's, for us, that's being able to still ship products to consumers in a high quality manner and with speed and efficiency. So how do we keep our employees safe and healthy? As leaders, it's incumbent upon us to set protocols and make sure we're protecting that health. And so one thing we're doing is if you're sick, like the reason Michael wasn't allowed here today or chose not to come was there was zero tolerance on anything sickness related. Just don't come into the office. We're not doing any interviews or having any guests through at the office at all right now, unless like they're 95% being hired. Like it's the final stage of interviews. Everything else is off site. We're not allowing any non-essential work travel right now. So we've canceled a bunch of trips we had coming up that were like not really essential to the success of the business, just relationship building trips, things like that. And then setting up like Purell hand sanitizers all over the office. We use alcohol in our products. We had actually a slew of just bottles of like isopropyl alcohol. So we just bought a bunch of cloths and we're just spraying them. And everyone's wiping desks down. We have our cleaning staff every night cleaning every door handle, every surface that people touch regularly, like fridge handles, things like that as well. And so that's like in protecting our employees' health. And then we have protocols in place, 3 different protocols based on severity of the situation, on how we will enable employees to work from home only, and then how will we still ship product. And there's like a really strict, like literally people wearing hazmat suits coming in and shipping product. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Oh, amazing. Did you ever participate in Mark Bush's lecture when you were in the program? Were you able to sit in that one or not?
Was that on like Contagion or something?
Mark Bush is a Georgetown professor of entrepreneurship and one of the world leaders on international trade and tariffs.
Oh no, I didn't sit in that one.
Great.
Yeah, okay.
I should have probably.
Yeah, and Natasha, you sat in on that.
Yeah.
Do you want to? Because he would have thoughts on impact to businesses when you've got a globally integrated supply chain, and maybe talk about, if you remember a little bit about what that class was like.
Yeah, he's actually an awesome teacher. I mean, I think for us, like sometimes some of the classes I'd go to weren't maybe necessarily relevant to me and my business, but relevant to my curiosity around the world. And I mean, I love economics, and things to do with trade are very interesting to me. And I think just sitting in on, I think I went to one of his classes and just kind of, it's uncanny because you realize how interconnected our world really is. And I think a lot of people downplay things like COVID-19 and all of that, but it has real impact on businesses and their bottom lines. You're seeing it in the stock market. And I think through his class, he has a very interesting way of just showing you how things relate to each other. I think sometimes he uses like cartoons, but like he just, he's had the benefit of sitting in like very powerful global discussions around trade. And I think some of the insights that he brings to the classroom are just very interesting, especially if you enjoy the news and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Hopefully he's back this summer. Yeah. We're starting to run out of time. And so I want to give you an opportunity to highlight the best piece of advice that you've received kind of on your entrepreneurial journey, not necessarily from Next. And if you would prefer to twist it into a piece of advice that you could give to someone who's kind of following you, that's okay as well. But a piece of advice that you received that was really profound.
Something too much for you yet?
Okay.
Yeah, put you on the spot.
It's kind of a classic one, but this concept of like hiring better than yourself, I think it sounds so smart when you think about it. It is, but it's the way you deploy it. Like, everyone's smart in different ways, right? So you're really trying to find someone who knows the subject matter specifically is better than you do, right? Because I think when you're a founder, you don't really know what you're doing. As much as you understand business or finance or brand or what have you, like you don't know each independent vertical of your company. And so you have to find people who have the depth, right? And so it's about hiring people who have that depth. The challenge is when you don't know you don't know what you're doing, you don't know who's good for that role, kind of, right? And so that's what for me personally, like if I didn't know operations, I don't know how to scale up like a manufacturing line and set up a global supply chain, like how the hell am I going to figure that out? So, I brought on a chief operating officer who she figured it all out. She had done this before, right? So like I hired her because she knew what she was doing, and I don't have to worry about that shit anymore. So, did I swear? I can't. I'll swear.
That's fine.
So hire better than yourself, but leverage other people to help you understand what the specifics of that role are, because you probably don't know what's even better than you sometimes.
Brilliant.
I think as an entrepreneur, just generally, I think a really sound piece of advice is to kind of just focus on your own journey. I think it's very easy to compare, especially if you're in a program like Next Founders, where we had people who are probably in Series C and D, and then, you know, some just at the seed stage. And it's really easy to compare your year one with someone else's year 5. But that's just, you haven't gone through those sacrifices that they've already gone through, or, you know, everyone has their own set of circumstances. And I think it's a real disservice to yourself as an entrepreneur to compare. It's normal as humans to do that. We're all competitive, especially as entrepreneurs. But I think no matter what happens with your business, if it survives, it doesn't, you're going to come out of there learning a lot, and it will be a part of your journey to wherever you're going. And I think just, you know, believing in yourself and your abilities, because if you don't believe in yourself, like, honestly, no one's going to. So that's kind of the main thing I'd say for an entrepreneur.
I actually have a really good way of framing that I use mostly on social media when I see people traveling and stuff and I'm not. But
It's good right now.
Yeah, it's good right now. Yeah, I'm like, yes. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
So you constantly compare yourself to other people, you're never going to be happy.
Yeah.
So true. Okay, well, I would like to thank Natasha and Tyler for giving their time to share their experience with everybody watching. You're both very busy, and I appreciate it, and you're great ambassadors for the program. For anybody who is interested in applying, we've got 2 entrepreneurs who come from different backgrounds, working in different industries, different stages. The offer that I can make to you if you're serious about applying is that if you want to talk to an alumni in a particular sector where you're building your business, please reach out to info@nextcanada.com and we will make that happen. Again, the deadline to apply is March the 18th. I believe that you will see the application link in the Facebook video, and don't forget to submit the video component to your application as well. I should highlight that when you apply, it is a 2-part application process. The first part, you will be typing out answers to your entrepreneurial background and also your business, the traction that you've got, your business model, gaps, you know, how you're hoping to leverage what is in Next Canada and Next Founders to help your business. The second part of the application is actually using Kira Talent, which is a Next 36 alumni. And so we try to practice what we preach and support our entrepreneurs and use their products and services. And so we use Kira, which is a video interview platform that is used by some of the top business schools and universities around the world to screen applicants that are coming in. Their current CEO and co-founder is Emily Cushman, who's an alumni of Next 36 and is on our board of directors. And you will be asked 3 or 4 pre-recorded video questions. It's a little uncomfortable if it's the first time you've done a video interview. You'll have about 45 seconds to think about your answer. Your webcam turns on, you give the response, and that gets beamed to Next Canada so our selection committee can review your application. And so there are 2 parts to the application, but on behalf of our whole team, we are excited to receive that application and hope that we'll get to meet face-to-face in the future. And so please reach out if you've got any questions. Otherwise, best of luck with your application, and we'll be talking soon. Take care.